What's up, STSNation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. This one is a lunchtime special, and we've got a dandy for you. Of course, it is week 4 of the Vallow Daybell trial, day 16 to be precise. It is the trial of the so-called Doomsday Mom, the wildly twisted story of a seemingly loving mother, a self-proclaimed devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who clearly veered way off course. She became involved in the deaths of as many as 5, possibly 6 people, including her own children. And we've got some amazing best guests today. You've seen her before on our show, Lee Wallace. She graduated first in her class at Vanderbilt University and cum laude from Harvard Law School. Not a shabby CV, as they say. She was named one of the top 100 lawyers in Georgia and a Georgia SuperLawyer every year since the poll began. Her accolades continue, and she also has a popular YouTube channel called Harvard Lawyer Lee, and she'll be doing a live at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time following this show, so make sure you check her out on her YouTube channel, Harvard Lawyer Lee. Then we've got Dr. Daryl Appleton, a new face to the show, and I was excited to find out she is, in fact, a Jersey girl, now a Jersey woman. She is I love this description that she has in her bio, the innovative and modern-day doyenne of wellness, who is reshaping corporate and individual visions of wellness. Since opening a consulting firm that bears her name, she holds an exclusive clientele and it cut off right here. So all you need to know is that Dr. Appleton holds a doctorate of education in leadership, a master of education in counseling, a certificate of graduate studies in mental health, and a licensed mental health counselor degree in the state of Rhode Island. And she knows everything going on in your brain and more, and is great at what she does. And then we've got Dr. Roger Rhodes trying to get his audio fixed up here. He is a senior therapist at the Pace Center in Greenville, South Carolina, specializing in dysfunctional relationships, which comes in quite handy when talking about Vallow Daybell. Please, as you know, follow us on Facebook, Twitter. I post showtimes on Twitter at Podcast STS. You can also see photos of Carm and everyone else on my Instagram page, which is also at Surviving the Survivor. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can support us at Patreon and become a YouTube member if you would like to do so. So, as I said, day 16 of the Vallow Daybell trial. And normally we don't do this. Roger Rhodes is with us. Hello, Dr. Raj.
Good to be with you.
Excellent. We are rolling into it. And kudos to the chief technical officer for getting Dr. Roger Rhodes.
Your wife is a dream. I'm telling you straight up, buddy. She gets it done. Thank goodness for women. Woo!
Thank goodness for women is right. Yeah. And speaking of women, Dr. Daryl Appleton, we have not had you on. And right now you're saying to yourself, what have I gotten myself into? But don't worry, we will have fun. So Lori Vallow is in court for day 16. Normally, we don't do this every day, but there was a description of her today, walking in wearing a white blouse and dress suit, which is interesting because the first few days of the trial, she was in all black, and our jury consultant said that was a horrible look for her. She should be in soft colors, pastels, and now she is in all white. But there are a lot of people who are traveling to this trial, and this happens to be from Nate Eaton, who's covering this for the East Idaho News. And he said that the court onlookers have told him that she looks much older than in photos. And one person said to him, and I quote, "She is in grandma mode." Dr. D, Daryl Appleton, I mean, what kind of stress, and you're a person that's into well-being, what kind of stress being in jail, accused of these heinous crimes, likely to be convicted, what kind of stress does that take? What kind of toll does it take on your person?
It's a huge stressor. It can't be a little bit of stress. And we know that cortisol in the body and in the brain, it wreaks havoc on the immune system, on our skin, on all parts of well-being. And I think strategically, this dress that you mentioned, this dress code that she's wearing, the blouse, the pants, you know, there's something too about this idea of having this angelic nature, this grandmotherly nature. And I think it's going to be key in how she is presenting and presented, as well as probably how she feels about herself. I think there's something self-fulfilling about also seeing yourself in all white. So I think it's a really interesting choice all around. But yeah, the stress is 100% there.
And Dr. Roger Rhodes, I know you weren't hearing us before, but Dr. Appleton comes from your world of analyzing people. So you two are in the same boat. and Harvard lawyer Lee is exactly that. She's a Harvard lawyer. Jag writes, this call was jaw-dropping. We're going to get into this call that was played yesterday in court, and court is underway right now. We'll get into some of the details of what's happening today. But yesterday there was a call played between Summer Shiflett, who is Lori's sister, and Lori, and Jag said the call was jaw-dropping. Dr. Rhodes, Lori said in the call very casually, it's a quote, "They had been dead for months. I had to move on and try to be happy." Wow, she's just admitting it over a recorded jail call just so casually. What do you make of this admission, this quote, and how nonchalant she appears to be about the exposure of the death of her two children, Raj?
Well, I think Lori from day one has tried to control the narrative, and she has missed the mark left and right. And so anything recorded by her, she certainly didn't feel it was significant. And now that other people are bringing it out and showing, wait a minute, something's a little off here, I think you're really getting to the nature of how ill this woman is and how she put little emphasis on quote unquote reality. And the only thing that mattered was what she had decided the narrative of this was, which was she was innocent. They were zombies. That, you know, even though that's nonsensical, in her world, that was reality.
And Dr. Raj, you know, just a few moments ago, it was revealed that our old friend Alec Murdaugh, that's where I met you, working on that trial, just charged for something else, tax evasion. So it seems that these people have, there's no bottom to their psychopathy. Is that right, Dr. Rhodes?
That is so true. And what a great connection there. Her and the Murdaughs, buddy. There we go. I mean, you have to look at the word normal and try to strain it through literally unwell people. And you're really beginning to see the contrast. And boy, once they start going down, there is no bottom. They live in a bottomless world. And so that's one of the things that's really threw us off about Murdaugh, throwing us off about this, is that these people are not in reality, and they're looking for everybody else to jump on their view of reality. And Murdaugh saw that it's not going anywhere. And so these are things that were lingering, like Murdaugh's, it was lingering. And I think that's the same thing we're seeing with Lori. Things were lingering before the hammer came down. And so, yeah, do I see a parallel? Totally. And is it going to just keep on keeping on, piling on? Yeah. It's the same kind of, they're not well. And once people get a little insight on it, they just go for it.
Yeah.
And that's what the reality police are doing in this.
Extremely not well. Harvard lawyer Lee, I promise we're getting to you, but these comments are coming in first from Jen Till. To you, Dr. Appleton, Cold Lori is an absolute monster. I wish we could see if she had any reaction to all the details detectives and agents shared about finding the children destroyed in the ground, but she smiled. Sick. We are not seeing her. We are being able to hear her, but there are reports, that she's taken a lot of notes and that there were smiles at times. From a psychoanalytic standpoint, how do you read this?
She knew what she was doing, and she chose to do it with pride and enthusiasm, in my opinion. I think there was a lot in the phone calls there, her reaction there. Obviously, she's being coached on how to react and to not react, but even a smile that's escaping, it's incredibly telling. And I think when we talk about evil, when we talk about, the psychology and even the neuropsychology of the brain and behavior, you can't fake that. You can't just, be coached out of something that, infects you to your core and to your soul and in the depths of that nature.
To you, Harvard Lawyer Lee, and the comments will be flooding in every time Harvard Lawyer Lee is on. We get a gazillion comments. It's like having LeBron on the show. Good morning from Maui, from Catherine Regier. Coffee's ready. Dog is fed. Looking forward to Harvard Lawyer Lee. By the way, I forgot to feed my dog. Proof STS really does have the best guests. Harvard Lawyer Lee is a fan favorite for sure. So I sent you something, but before we get to that, Harvard Lawyer Lee, it was announced that there will be a status conference in Chad's case scheduled for May 4th, 3:45 p.m. What does that mean in people speak? What can we expect from a status conference like that?
There are a number of issues that are still outstanding. For example, there was some new DNA evidence that was produced. That's why his trial got put off. He was supposed to be tried with Lori. One trial. The judge had spent a lot of time trying to put the two of them in the same trial. It would have been cheaper, gotten it over with one time, used a lot less resources. But ultimately, Lori would not give up her right to a speedy trial. And Chad said, no, I want time to respond to this new evidence. So they'll be talking about any kind of new evidence, anything that the state wants to use that he doesn't. It'll just be sort of a laundry list of what do we need to get done and what needs to happen so that we can try this case.
And then the thing that I sent you, apparently, and I got this from the great Gigi McKelvey, who's a court reporter on this case and has her podcast, Pretty Lies and Alibis, which is fantastic. She reported that the state informed the court and the defense about a potential concern with a redacted individual. They don't name the person, who they say is a witness that the state plans to call in its case in chief. Harvard Lawyer Lee, what could this be about? And this is kind of a late stage in the trial. Any guesses here?
It very intentionally doesn't tell you. It's redacted so that it reads as the state has a concern about somebody, about something, and we want to show you something so that you can make a decision. I mean, that's literally what it says. And there's been a lot of critique of the court that there's been too much secrecy. There's been too much sealing. I know you've had Lori Hellis on your show, and she's filed motions with the court saying this shouldn't be sealed. This should be public. Well, this is an example where you literally can't tell what it is because of the intense need for secrecy. We can tell this. There's a concern about a witness. It's the state's witness. The state wants to call this witness, not the defense. And there's some concern. And in order to rule on that, there needs to be a copy of something submitted for in-camera review. My guess, we've already had two witnesses who had troubles with having seen information in the media before they testified. The court has invoked the exclusionary rule, which means nobody should be watching somebody else's testimony before they testify, unless they're a family member, and he specifically named the family representative. So other than those witnesses, and they've already testified, then the only people, everybody testifying should have seen nothing from testimony by other people until they completely finished their testimony. So I would assume that it's just a guess, but somebody saw an article or something, that's what was submitted to the court, and there needs to be discussion about, has this person violated the exclusionary rule? Is it okay for the person to testify? It's just a guess because they didn't give us enough information.
Probably a very good guess, much more educated than my guess would have been. Dr. Appleton, my father was a psychiatrist. My mother is a licensed therapist. So I'm always interested in you and the Rogers of the world and how you analyze things from a very macro perspective. Why are people so hooked on and fascinated by cases like this? What's your take?
There's actually research that's been done that shows that when we watch true crime, when we watch the horrible things that happen to other people, it can actually serve as a way for us to protect ourselves. It actually serves as a model of what to look out for, and on a very kind of survivalist level. There's also this inquiry of just outside of the norm of anything. It's fascinating. It tickles the fancy, and we're drawn into it. This idea of abnormal behavior, my air quotes are out. And this deviant behavior is something that captivates us because I think we're always on the lookout for it. There's also lots of research that shows that we all have sadistic tendencies. I think we all have this tendency potentially to do bad things. How bad, how evil, I'm not sure. But I think that if the Stanford prison studies tell us anything, we do have the capacity to do things that we don't think that we're capable of before we're put in a situation where things just kind of explode out of control. And I think that's why we're so drawn into this, and it captivates so many. And we can talk true crime to anybody in any culture at any time, intergenerationally. I don't think it's something you ever grow out of or, have to grow into. So I think there's a lot of things that connect us on a human level when we see humans doing terrible things to other humans.
Well put. Dr. Raj, before we get to you, I'd like you to add to that. Julie Frew in the UK, welcome to SDS, Dr. Darrell. Great to see Harvard lawyer Lee, and my favorite so far. Welcome, Dr. Darrell. Hooray for Jersey girls. Yes, yes, yes. So, Raj, what do you have to add to this? I mean, is Dr. Appleton on the mark as to why people are fascinated by these cases? Anything else that...
Yeah, she's smart. That's the first thing I want to say. Wow. Put me back to school there. I'm like, wee, man, a Harvard lawyer, professor. Wow, this is tough. But, people love puzzles. And these cases are like puzzle pieces thrown around, and everybody's kind of scurrying to see who can put the puzzle together in a believable set. And so that's part of the draw of it, is being the person who comes up like in grade school, the kid that got the answer first. Whoa, buddy, that's the deal. We don't grow out of that as adults, and nothing kills me looking at the Harvard lawyer, and in that she's saying, well, I think, and I'm thinking, goodness gracious, if she's guessing at her level, we're way out of it. So that's part of it. There's a whole system within a system going on in this, and I think it's the water is very blurred and dirty because of this, and I think Lori believes her narrative is going to come out, but in the meantime, we still have scattered puzzle pieces, and we still have people wanting to figure out how to put them together. That's just basic human nature. And I don't believe I'm sadistic. man, I'm thinking, oh Lord, I hope I don't hurt anybody. Man.
So court is actually in session as we come to you live, and the pathologist is on the stand, and Sarah Ann giving us this update. And guys, feel free to do that. Anyone following the court updates just heard, according to the pathologist on the stand today, right now, that JJ died of asphyxia from duct tape on his mouth and a plastic bag over his head, which is horrific. But Harvard lawyer Lee, back to you here from Cheryl Hawk. What we were talking about a moment ago, to say to her sister the kids had been dead for months and she wanted to move on with her life. Wow. Wouldn't that be enough circumstantial evidence to convict from a legal standpoint? What's your take on that?
Well, okay. And let me say something about JJ too. I will say this. I have been hoping from the beginning that was not it, that somehow, they gave him pills or something and he, just overdosed. It was just a sleep thing. That is horrendous. I mean, I really can't believe that. I am absolutely appalled. But thanks for the update. Yeah. It's a sad one. It's a sad one.
It is horrific. And by the way, Lori Hellis is tweeting out photos of JJ and Ty Lee, obviously during much better times, as a way to remember them. But this is really horrible news. So anyway, go ahead, Harvard lawyer Lee.
So as far as the circumstantial evidence, I don't think usually that one single piece of circumstantial evidence is enough. It takes sort of an array. It has to reach the level that the jury's persuaded. When you have direct evidence, a video of somebody doing something, one piece of evidence is clearly enough. Occasionally, there might be a piece of circumstantial evidence so great that it's enough, but usually it takes more than one piece. So I think that all of those little components, all of those facts come in and they mount up over time. And it's that wide array. I do think what she's talking about from that particular video is really important. That's in fact what my video at 1:30 is going to be about. I'm going to be talking and analyzing Summer Shiflett's phone call with Lori in prison and talking about the really key points where I think Lori admitted things that matter for the case and how important that is. And
I'm hoping to go over that call, not to burst your bubble, Harvard lawyer Lee, but maybe you can give us a little preview on this show. And we'll go over the call in a little bit, but right back to you, Harvard lawyer Lee, for a moment. Two questions to you. Will there be a defense in this case? I had some lawyers on last night, and they think that there might not be any defense because it's sort of indefensible at this point. But in terms of calling witnesses, what do you anticipate?
So when you first said that, I thought you were asking, will they show up and ask questions? Because that's been a problem from the beginning, how many witnesses have gone past with no questions at all from the defense, and how little has been mounted in terms of defending Lori. And it's not that Lori Vallow Daybell deserves to be defended. It's that we as Americans deserve to have a system where every single person who goes into it is defended. So it's about our rights. It's not about who she is. And it has been slow. Yesterday, I felt like they finally came in with the defense. But I think the question you're asking is, are they going to actually put up witnesses? Are they going to have people show up and come to trial and say things? I don't know. They've kept the witness list secret and sealed, so there can't be any true answer to that. I would just think they have to put somebody on to say something. It just looks bad if absolutely no one shows up and says anything. There's just something wrong with that picture. But who? I have to agree with your lawyers last night. I don't know who it would be. I'm sure they're scratching their heads searching to try to find somebody. They've already had family, and boy, that didn't go well.
Yeah, and Jim Archibald, who's the lead defense attorney, seems sort of, I don't know, blasé might not be the right word, but less than enthusiastic about this case. We've got Isabel tuning in from Germany, and then we've got Lig Du Dull, if I'm saying that right, from London. So lest you think we're not a global show, think otherwise. Dr. Appleton, once again to you. And by the way, I love the name Daryl, like Daryl Hannah, Daryl Appleton. You're the only two Daryls I know.
Thank you. I'm in good company then, Miss Hannah.
It's a cool name. But I'm done having kids. So I won't name my daughters Daryl. Anyway, just again, you're new to the show, and we've been covering it for a while. Let me ask you a very intellectual, high-level question. What is the deal with Lori Vallow Daybell? I mean, we've asked the question, is she evil? Is she mentally ill? People who deal with mental illness have yelled at me, don't equate evil and mental illness or craziness. But what is your take on your diagnosis, if you will, on this woman?
I think that she was set up to be in a circumstance like this. And when I say set up, I don't mean other people have. I mean, she was in a situation where there was themes of loneliness and rejection and wanting of deep belonging. And we know through cult studies that that's ripe for the picking for somebody to come and kind of sway you into a particular way of being or mindset. Now, not without her permission, right? We all have our own agency and free will in this. But it is interesting because I do think that there are some things that can show up or be on the cusp of showing up. This idea of this dark tetrad. It's this idea that there are dark personalities that refer to a social set of adverse traits that are in a subclinical range, which is just a fancy way of saying people have adverse types of personality traits that don't actually show up clinically because there's not enough criteria for a diagnosis. So if you were taking the O'Hare psychopath test and you scored a 29 and the cutoff is 30, are you really not do you not have any psychopathic tendencies? And what is that 1 degree of separation? So I think she probably got by because she had many of these dark personalities that maybe weren't registering, but were very present in her everyday life. You know, her psychopathy is definitely there. There's a level of narcissism there. I think there's also Machiavellianism there of willing to do anything by any means necessary. Obviously, there's this cynical disregard for morality, and she's incredibly manipulative and smart. And this is about self-interest and personal gain. So I think and obviously the sadism there, and having this idea of direct harm to people for what she needed to get done. And there's, again, like it seems, and this might ruffle a few feathers, we all have the capacity to have these dark traits. It is well within human behavior to want to do things for ourselves or to be selfish. And my clinical expertise is in working with high performers and those who are at the top of their performance. So I work with a lot of professional athletes and executives and CEOs. And a lot of times we're managing some of these dark personalities and tendencies. And maybe it's not so much in the sadistic element, but absolutely in this Machiavellianism or sometimes in the narcissism. And there's a great book by Kevin Dutton, The Wisdom of Psychopaths, where he talks about how some of these personalities are absolutely essential into success. So I do think that when we look at Lori from this really kind of bird's eye view, we see all these things coupled with an upbringing, coupled with the social capacity that was almost ripe for the picking of her to be led down this course. And I do agree with people. Mental health and evil are not the same things, and we sometimes use them interchangeably. But I think this was incredibly evil, and outside the bounds of mental health. It goes far beyond that.
Dr. Raj, I'm going to have to work with you because Dr. Appleton only takes high performers. So it's me and you.
Let me tell you.
It's me and
I'm
you.
being schooled here.
Yeah, she's
I'm not like a smart person. Wow.
Yeah, she's intimidating. It sounds like a dinner table. My father and my mother, and I just didn't know what they're talking about. But anyway, it sounds good. Dr. Raj, she said something interesting. She said that Lori Vallow is smart. People may be upset with this. Yeah.
I tell you what's really got us is society set up with filters to catch the weird. And she has dodged all the filters. That's what's got everybody, is that she should have been caught long before this. It's not like this is the sole evil deed of this woman. Oh no, she has history, but not caught, not held back. She's killed people, still going. If it didn't meet her narrative, had to be gone. And I love the brother. Thank God he's far enough away that he wasn't on the chopping block. But boy, had she used the chopping block, you bet, but not caught. And that's kind of the dilemma on this one. Are the smart lawyers and the judicial system this time going to be able to catch her? And her history says, no, I'm smarter than them. Wow.
Hey, Dr. Appleton, you know, I didn't even know this, but Lori Vallow's father, her biological father, spent time in prison or incarcerated. Could these be learned traits, perhaps?
I think, you know, there's tons of people out there who have parents that are in prison and that don't go on to commit heinous crimes and kill their children and bury them in the backyard. But I do think that, you know, when we're talking about survival and when you put somebody back against the wall, that they'll fight their ways out. And when we talk about women specifically, we have a tendency to learn how to engage in a system that we feel powerless. And usually that's through a lot of manipulation, potentially. And I think that when you look at that video footage of Lori speaking with the officers when they brought her in for questioning, that blew my mind, just how she was able to dodge and evade. And it was like watching a master at work in the sickest way possible. And I think that footage for me right there was like mind blowing. Just wow, like this person knows exactly what they're doing. And I think I said it at the beginning of this show. She knew what she was doing, and she chose to do so with pride and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Joel, one of the things that convinced me she had to be really bright was when there was testimony about the fact that she had 18 different cell phones, and she called people by the wrong name on that cell phone and still managed to communicate. I was just hats off, man. If
That's
you
a
can
survival
pick up
skills.
oh,
What
look,
you're
it's
talking
Jack
about.
calling on the blue phone. It must be Sarah. I'll answer that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's that was also very eye-opening. The fact that they had these burner phones and all these multiple numbers really twisted and interesting all at the same time. We've got Anna from Poland. We've got Papa Bear from Moscow, Idaho. Of course, a place that's near and dear to us, the home of the quadruple homicide. And there is actually news coming out of there that we're going to get to on Friday related to Brian Koberger. But back to you, Harvard lawyer Lee. I think Lori's response, it's been months, was a sealing of her guilt. Done. It seems like STSNation is pointing to this phone call and saying game over. And I know you're going to talk about it. We're going to get into it. But do you agree that was what sealed her fate?
I think it's important. As I say, when there is solely evidence that's circumstantial, then I think you need to amass an amount of it. But I think that's important. I think that's extremely important. And I'm not just counting that. I'm just saying there needs to be additional things. So there's not one single thing that the jury will pick, but they certainly will care about that. They absolutely will.
I tell you, no one gets more shout outs. Great to see Lawyer Lee today. She gets more shout outs than anyone. I should bring LeBron and Harvard lawyer Lee on the same show just to see who gets more. Back to you, speaking of Harvard lawyer Lee, from Freshly Baked Dread. Love that. Does Lee Wallace believe the state is proving its case beyond a reasonable doubt if Lori didn't actually kill JJ and Tylee, but knew and wanted it to happen? This has kind of been the rub against the state's, against the state the entire time, that there's no real direct link, no direct evidence per se. How do you see it from your Harvard education as an attorney, Harvard lawyer Lee?
Well, to the extent we've had some defense, then I think clearly this is where the defense is headed, is that it was Chad. She was totally different after Chad, and maybe Alex, but it was not Lori. It was somebody else. And so they're pointing fingers at other people. But I think the state is very successfully using all of the phone calls and the timing of those. I've done a timeline that I talk about in my live streams where I set out specifically, okay, what happened when, so you can kind of put those into context, and you can see that the way that people, the timing of the phone calls and the text messages drastically increased right before what the prosecution believes is the murder time or date. And that, I think, is really telling. So I think they're doing a good job of pulling Lori into the group, not letting her separate herself from Chad and from Alex.
Dr. Appleton from Rhonda, no matter what conversation or with whom, she always steers it back to herself. Victim, exclamation mark. Is this a common trait amongst people like the Lori Vallow Daybells of the world, that they consider themselves victims?
It's narcissism at its core. Everything is about me, and it impacts me. Can't you imagine how I would feel? What do you think I'm going through? And I think that is a total lack of empathy. 101. We see this in a lot of people who have traits of narcissism, but that lack of empathy there, it's incredibly telling that she isn't even thinking about her children, or, even her sister, who it's impacted, like these kind of fringe victims, or so to speak. It's really sad. I'm a mother. I have 2-year-old twins. Like, it's horrifying to think anybody could do anything to them. It's even more horrifying to think I knew about it or I did it myself, and to think about me being the person that's impacted by it the most. So I think it just shows kind of what type of person she is. That saying of, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
As the father of a soon-to-be 9, a 7, and a very soon-to-be 4-year-old, I just had a heart palpitation at the thought of 2-year-old twins. So better you than me.
Amen.
Angela Pepple says, I'm sorry, but I don't think she truly thought they were zombies. What do you think? Do you think she really believed that?
If it helps her case, you bet. Do I believe she could put her hand on a Bible and swear that they were zombies? If it helped the case, yes. If it didn't help the case, wouldn't matter. You know, I love the narcissist line of this woman is big, and everything flows through that narrative. That is the narrative. It's all about me, poor me. I'm not part. Everybody's to blame. Just an incredible amount of finger pointing going on. Unless it's the camera, then she wants to point the finger at herself.
Dr. Appleton, do you think there's a moment where she goes back to her jail cell at the Ada County Jail and says to herself, what the hell did I do? Like this is crazy. Is there ever a moment when she reflects on it and exhibits some sort of remorse, even if it's just internally?
No, I think no. I honestly think, you know, and I'm a huge nerd and I like science. I think scientifically and neuropsychologically, our brain, when we talk about evil, our brain separates things into two categories for evil to happen. This idea of separating the individual out, meaning I am part of a larger group. They all thought they were zombies. We all thought that, you know, this should happen. You know, we see the Jim Joneses of the world, like being a part of a bigger picture, to not be self-accountable, to not have that individual responsibility for evil to happen. And then we obviously see people dehumanizing other people, seeing them less as human. It was a zombie. There's nothing that's as least human as you can get, you know, in terms of like subhuman. So no, I don't think that she is going back and reflecting on that. Maybe she is. I don't know. I'm not talking to her. But I think, you know, to Roger's point, like the narrative needs to keep going. And for her to sit up there every day, she needs to reinforce that narrative. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of, I am the victim. I didn't do anything wrong because I was trying to save their souls. And I mean, it's very hard to detach somebody from a narrative that suits them.
Well, can she be, quote unquote, a lot of people have asked this, could she be deprogrammed? Do you think it's even something that would have to be done? Or is it just one of her ploys being manipulative?
Wait a minute. If you were driving down a lane at 100 miles an hour, is it possible for you to turn around? Is what I would say. No, man, it would wreck the car. No, she's a victim. She's a narcissist. If they convict her, she'll go to jail like that. She'll stay in jail like that. When her life is over, she will die like that because that is her identity.
Wow.
That is the fuel that moves this car.
So I'm just curious. So do you think, Dr. Raj, and I want to get Dr. Appleton's take, that she can't be deprogrammed or doesn't want to be deprogrammed or doesn't need to be deprogrammed?
I believe both. I don't believe she can, and because I don't think she wants to. I think she is bonded to her narrative. That's really who she is. She has been following this narrative for years. She's been wiping people out based on this narrative. And somehow, when they finally have caught her, is she going to give up the narrative after killing all these people, even her children, which is just incredibly horrendous? No, man, she's a true believer. You know, she believes in the Lori story.
This is the reason why Dr. Phil is jealous of Dr. Raj. And by the way, I'm always thinking, and right now I smell a show hosted by Dr. Roger Rhodes and Dr. Daryl Appleton, something with like a doctor, an apple a day keeps the doctors. We'll come up with it. I smell a show.
Doctor and the other guy would be what that show would be called.
I happen to know people in the right places to make it happen. So I'm feeling this all out. I'm always thinking. But back to this for a moment. Abby Taha, a friend of the show. Yay, STS, woohoo. I wish I was on a conference call right now. Love and light, STSNation. You better tell the conference call to be subscribing to the show, at least make it worthwhile. Harvard lawyer Lee, Knightwood says, is Stephen Boyce the judge for Chad's trial also? Do we know this yet? Will he be
I believe he is. I believe he is, because he was going to try the cases together. So they were simply split apart. I don't see any reason why a separate judge would be assigned.
And then Susan asks, Harvard lawyer Lee, what do you think is the reason for so much secrecy? We had, by the way, a person on yesterday, Chris Thomas, who actually worked on the Elizabeth Smart case from the get-go. And he's very tight with her. He's written a book that just came out called Unexpected. He is a member of the Mormon Church, LDS. Talked about how this case is really connected, as much as he would like it not to be, because there are people of that persuasion and faith involved. But it is important to point out, I think, that, LDS is a legitimate religion. What Lori Vallow Daybell was dealing in was way off somewhere in a I don't know, a gully somewhere. But
where I grew up, you say off the reservation. That's what Lori was. He was off the reservation.
And for those who don't know, Raj is from the great state of Oklahoma. But Harvard lawyer Lee, there's been no cameras. And anyway, it came up yesterday because there's speculation that maybe members of the Church of Latter-day Saints didn't want cameras, didn't want this, why some motions weren't granted. What is your take on why no cameras and what people perceive to be secrecy?
I've definitely heard people talking about the church's influence and the idea that they have had an impact on whether or not the case was broadcast, on whether or not there would be secrecy in documents, all kinds of things like that. That's possible. I honestly can't say for sure, but I will say this. There are plenty of other cases where judges have made similar decisions when the LDS Church was nowhere around and it wasn't involved. There was nothing related to that. I think there is a tendency among some lawyers and judges to just believe deeply in secrecy. I used to work for a guy, and one of my fellow associates said, he thinks you can take secrecy to the bank and earn interest on it. And I think for a lot of lawyers, that's kind of the view, is that secrecy is great, really important. And so that if that's a value for some people, they might make that decision even independently of pressure from the church. So I honestly don't know in this case. We certainly see an unusually high amount, even to the point where I think Lori Hellis's motions about, hey, I get that you don't want to broadcast things, Judge, but these documents clearly should be public. And I think it's been unusually high in this case.
Yeah, and the judge obviously targeted her. She came on the show, even though, she doesn't take too much umbrage with it, but she filed some motions, and it seems like there was a little retaliation. Papa Bear makes an interesting comment. Dr. Appleton, we humans are always trying to make sense of things. It helps us feel secure and more in control. Maybe why I've adopted some OCD in my life. But what do you make of that?
Papa Bear's right. It's definitely something that we do. The brain's designed to keep us safe. That is its function. It's why we remember terrible things that happen more so than positive things that happen. If I asked you to list your worst memory versus your best one, you would probably answer me right away on the former and have a little bit more trouble with the latter. So our brains are designed to take information and to store it on things that make us feel not so good. So I think when we're talking about control, when we're talking about trying to piece things together so it won't happen to us, so that we feel like we have some sense of control, that's deeply rooted into our nature as human beings. So I completely agree with that.
And David, friend of the show, hello, STSNation, from the Jersey Shore, for Dr. Appleton, who's also from New Jersey.
Hello, David.
And then a nice comment from Carly. Dr. Darrell, you're awesome. Hopefully she will come back, even though this has been, I don't know what's going on. Speaking about what's going on in someone's mind, I have no idea what's going on in Dr. Appleton's mind. And speaking of that, Anna has a question, Dr. Raj. Yeah. People want to know why. Same with the jury. They want to know why. In the case of the Alec Murdaugh trial, same thing. That's where you and I met. We don't really know why. Any idea as to why here?
No. Because I think rationally, there's got to be some level of magical thinking going on to somehow come up with a why. I think that's about what the person said and the doctor said before. You know, you want to feel comfortable. You want to be able to feel like you have a level of control to take the next step, to live your life, even though it's magical thinking. Do I think that a logical mind can come up with a legitimate why? No. I think she is not an actor. She is a reactor. So she's very unique to, you have to think of a dodgeball game and her being aware of where the balls are going to come from and how to dodge it. That's her lifestyle. Do you know this ball or that ball or what it's going to be to rotate? No, it just depends on the moment. But she certainly has a skill set of avoidance. And she has used that to empower herself over people. And that's where people worship. They watch how good she dodges the ball and go, ooh-wee, she's it. No, that is a sick style. And I would think that she'll go to her grave and no one will figure out why, unless she finds a book deal that gives her a lot of money and some kind of more notability from her narcissism. Then we may know why from there. But I think even if we knew why, she's not well. So, that's like asking Manson why, or asking any of the multi-killers why.
It makes me think of that trolley analogy, right? Philippa Foot, 1967, I think, this whole trolleyology of like, you're sitting there, 5 people are tied to the track by a madman. You have an opportunity. Do you let the 5 people die, or do you flip the switch and there's 1 person tied to the track? Would you sacrifice 1 life for 5 or 5 lives for 1? This is what comes to mind when I think of this case and Lori. I think she decided that she was going to save herself and she was going to sacrifice the people on the track, anybody that got in her way, so she could have what she needed to have. And I think that it's as simple and as deranged as that, to point of Dr. Raj, like there is no why. That the why is because she could and because people were in her way and she was able to discard of them. And, there is no specific parts of the brain that make us moral creatures. Neuroscience, Josh Green, they show us that we are really and truly not going to make moral decisions just because we are built that way. It takes a whole brain process. And we're actually more likely to think about decisions made by logic versus by emotion differently. When we can logically think through things, this controlled cognitive process, it's called, versus this automatic emotional response, which is triggered by emotion, we tend to have different outcomes. And we're all guilty of that. Again, not to murdering our children and burying them in the backyard.
Good.
When we literally have different things and we can sit down and think through things logically and maybe even have the support system or the background to help us get to another solution, things like this don't happen. But I think to be honest, I think they were in her way and this was the easiest path forward.
Well,
I want to say something about Anna's question kind of from a legal perspective, because I think while you're correct, there's not really a why. She is asking a question that is absolutely what everybody is asking and what the jury will ask. And that's one of the reasons that even though the prosecution doesn't have to show a motive, they often try to, because it's so much more palatable to people if they have a motive instead of just, do you believe the person did it for no reason out of thin air? And so technically, legally, you don't have to show a motive if you're the prosecution. You just have to show that the person committed the crime. But it is something that people can accept and move with a lot more easily if they really feel like they've got a grasp on the why.
Yeah, we were covering a case, which we're going to get back to later in the week again, of this tech CEO from San Francisco who was stabbed to death. He was actually living in Miami, visiting San Francisco. And it turns out the person who is the suspected killer, that this tech CEO was having an affair with his sister and doing drugs with her, apparently, according to reports. And so in that case, just as an example, it made me think of that right away. there is a clear reason why this person acted, and already the defense is looking to try to get manslaughter charges. So just goes to show that if you can actually say why it happened, it can impact the outcome of the trial. But Jane Gardner here writes, and this again is difficult, but the forensic pathologist is on the stand as we're doing the show. Jane is telling us the cause of death was asphyxia, but that doesn't mean Lori did not give him sleep medication for JJ beforehand. Apparently, she gave him sleep medication regularly, followed here by Smiley Band Mom here. That makes me so sick to my stomach about JJ's cause of death, as if this isn't all horrific enough already. Followed here by Ketchup, who is a friend of the show, leaving South Florida for North Carolina. I'm upset about that. Can't imagine how Larry and Kay Woodcock, the grandparents, feel and the rest of their family are feeling. But to you, Dr. Appleton, I mean, how do you even begin to process or understand what family members are going through? They're also sometimes they are scapegoated into not being the victims, but they are the victims as well. And even Lori's uncle was interviewed yesterday, her mother's brother, and he was brought to tears in the interview, saying he's just glad that justice is he hopes will prevail. But how do you begin to process what the victims are going through here?
It's a lot, and vicarious trauma is a real thing. And this did happen to them directly in a different way, but it is a direct link and a direct correlation to their lives. They lost grandchildren and daughters and family members. So I think that for them, it's a long road ahead. I do believe in post-traumatic growth. I do believe good things can come out of horrible things happening. So I hope that they lean into that and they get counseling and they get help, because this can be an incredibly dark time for people, and terrible things can happen from that when they feel isolated and alone. So the stages of grief are real. And I think they're probably still in this denial stage, or maybe they're entering into a bargaining stage because they're still waiting to see what happens with this trial, or maybe they're in a depression stage. But eventually, and hopefully, they get to an acceptance of it, and they can do something positive with the memories of these children, and being able to advocate or to help, whether it's micro in their own lives or macro for the world. But I do hope that, post-traumatic stress is not the case, but instead we have post-traumatic growth that they can kind of lean into once the dust has settled and cleared. But I don't think anything is going to happen in terms of acceptance while this trial is ongoing. There's just too much information continuing to come out. There's too much that they have to process, even if they know it, to hear it from a lawyer's mouth or see it through evidence. Like, it's re-triggering, it's re-traumatizing, and it's going to take a lot for the dust to settle for them.
And I've never heard of post-traumatic growth, but that is a good antidote to PTSD. Andy School writes, Raj, this one's from you, a little off track, but Andy's a good friend of the show, watching in Detroit. Between Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, and even history covering Napoleon's reign, which can be found criminal and how he ruled, the allure to sociopathy in man is maybe a survival mechanism. Dr. Raj, do you agree?
Not man survival mechanism, human survival mechanism. It would be great to say, man, it's only guys that no, people, there are people that adapt and to survive and do what it takes to get it done. And have they made history? Well, obviously Napoleon did. So yeah, and I really want to go back to the post-traumatic healing of that. I've seen that as a therapist. I know what the doctor's talking about. I 100% support that. And the ripples of this on the family ties is a small wave that I see only getting bigger and hit them harder. And so that their need, I hope if any of them are listening to this show, that they hear, don't get immediate help, get long-term help, because the waves are coming. They're going to get bigger in every cycle, and you will need help during those waves.
Great advice. And Kay Woodcock, and I hope she's doing relatively okay considering the circumstances. She had been watching the show and interacting in the chat. Understandably, she is dealing with a trial right now. But if you are listening, Kay, at a later time, please heed Dr. Raj's sage advice. Raikaru writes for Harvard lawyer Lee, can a state witness also be called as a defense witness?
Yes, in theory, yes. Often judges will say, I want you to get everything done in one go through. And it kind of makes sense. If you put the witness up, go ahead and ask all of the questions now that you have for direct and redirect that you would have had on the prosecution side or the defense, and will allow broader latitude in the cross-examination also. So normally, I mean, I've had judges do it both ways. I've had times when I was able to put up a witness and then the defense put it up separately, or where there was a case where everybody was told, go ahead and finish this witness right now and let's release this witness. If you release a witness, it has a very great benefit of they don't have to worry about seeing anything in the media or any kind of publications about the trial. It's over, they're done, they're off the stand. But sometimes a witness gets recalled. Sometimes you don't even know that you want to recall the witness because you don't know that some issue is going to come up until it comes up at trial. And then you find out, okay, I need that witness.
And Harvard lawyer Lee, Maggie Seymour writes, the state should be worried about appeal. They were screwed from the beginning, not meeting the speedy trial requirement. That is an issue that has come up again and again. What is your take on this?
So appeal is always going to be an issue in one of these cases. There is always going to be an appeal. The statistics are that appeals almost never succeed. It is very rare. So people really need to put their eggs in the trial basket. Don't count on the appeal to make a difference. On the speedy trial, the judge was, I think, about as careful as he could be. They pushed it, the state pushed it with all the late productions of documents. They really pushed him. But she did twice get sent for evaluations and for treatment because she wasn't mentally competent to stand trial. So I think that won't be an issue on appeal, but I understand it will be an issue on appeal. I don't think it will be a winning issue on appeal in the end because hardly any issues are.
And that is a distinction between an appeal and a winning issue on an appeal. So good way to differentiate that. Not My Deal writes, my first live show, ! Always love your show, but this is live, baby. Yes, it is. We need Dick Vitale or Dr. Raj to say live, baby, because I feel like they would be saying it in a similar manner. On to some kind of
macabre, get her done.
Macabre and depressing stuff, because I want to get some of this in here. Today, FBI Special Agent Steve Daniels was back on the stand. He was at the burial site, basically digging up the bodies. And he said today, again, once we found JJ's remains, we knew Tylee was around here somewhere. Was Tylee buried underneath JJ? We had to be very careful. As you guys know, I'm sure by now, JJ was found in a black plastic bag, and it says under the black plastic bag is a white plastic bag. This FBI agent cuts the white plastic bag, and human hair starts coming out with a razor blade into his hands. That's the point we decide these are human remains. I made an oval shape in the ground, and it has the feel of a human skull. That's what I presume it is, and on it goes. Harvard lawyer Lee, emotionally, what does that do to the 18 jurors, 12 and 6 alternates who are listening to all this testimony? Because it's brutal to even read it.
It is brutal. And often there's a fight before the trial gets started about what's going to be allowed in and what's not. And the defense will argue that various pieces of evidence are prejudicial to the jury, that if they hear that, it's not going to be possible for them to be fair because they're going to be so overwhelmed by how horrible it is. They're just going to convict whoever is sitting there in that defense chair. And in this case, it is totally horrible, but it's also necessary. And the judge ruled it in, and he did not have a choice. I mean, this is necessary. This is the truth about what occurred and about how they found them. Could he draw some lines around it? Sure, but I don't think he's messed up on this at all.
And so, the pivotal testimony could arguably be made that it was yesterday between Summer Shiflett, the sister of Lori Vallow, and Lori Vallow on the phone call. And I'd like to just go through this call and sort of do a round the horn here and get your guys' take, both from a legal and a therapeutic standpoint or therapy standpoint. But at 11:10 a.m. yesterday in court, the call starts. "How are you?" Lori asks. Summer responds, "Not good," as she begins to sob. "I don't know what to say. I'm willing to listen if you want to talk to me," Summer says. Lori says she doesn't know what anybody knows and doesn't know anything. Lori says she hasn't talked to anybody, and then goes on to say, "I know they found Tylee buried in a pet cemetery and JJ buried in Chad's backyard, and we don't understand how that happened." Summer's sobbing now. She can barely breathe. "You didn't tell us any of this. We are devastated." Dr. Appleton, it's painful to listen to. Lori seems, my word would be just detached, inhuman. What's your take on hearing that?
It's a great word to use. It's interesting because not once did she try to comfort her sister or, make that connection there. And the way she says things is very factual. And I think when somebody that you arguably love is so emotional with you or around you about losing a family member of their own and trying to talk to you about it, it was guarded. It was just, again, your word is perfect, so detached. And I think that just sums up Lori and who she is. I don't expect anything different.
So hard to wrap your head around it because we, as quote unquote normal humans, act so differently. But Dr. Raj, the call goes on. Summer asks Lori if she knew that they were there, meaning the kids. Lori says, "I can't talk about it." Summer says she doesn't know what to say, and then, quote unquote, "The kids were thrown away like garbage. It's too painful." Lori quietly responds, "Do you think I let that happen?" Summer responds, "Yes, I do." And Summer then says, "You went off to Hawaii and were dancing on the beach as the kids were on the ground. You had to know they were there. I don't understand. They were just little kids. I don't understand." You have two people speaking to one another, two sisters, and they're like totally different planes.
Yes.
They're just, there's no crossover in any way. Summer is obviously devastated by it, and Lori, I don't know, is just disregarding the entire situation, right?
One thing you need to think about is look at Lori's life like a self-made movie, okay? With a self-made script. Lori's following that. Lori produced that. Lori directed that. That's the life of Lori. And just because they're biologically connected, the sister, doesn't mean the sister intuitively gets the movie. So she's all frustrated and acting like a person normally would because she's living in the moment of life. But Lori doesn't do that. Lori has a movie going and she's following the movie. And when things don't fit the movie, I don't know. And she then, and it's funny how she asked her sister, "Don't you get it?" And obviously the sister never has got it, along with a lot of other people. And unless you get the inside of the Lori movie, you're not going to get it either. And that's what's been going on. The Lori movie versus reality. There's the dance that we're seeing psychologically.
I want to ask our doctors a question if I'm allowed to do that.
100%.
Okay.
The smart one you can ask, the other one no.
They're siblings, full-blooded sisters, and insanely different on that phone call. Can you talk to me about that? It seems nearly impossible. How did that happen?
I think at the end of the day, same upbringing. We see this, with twin studies. We see this with sibling studies, that just because you're raised in the same household or, with similar parents or similar situations doesn't mean that you're going to be the same. It's that nature versus nurture piece. And, I can't say which one happened or which one was more at play, but something broke her very early on, whether she was predisposed to that or, over life, it hardened her. I think, if we look at her history, if we look at, where she started her origin story and we kind of follow that trail, you're going to see a lot of small things she did that led her to this not being a big thing, all the small things along the way. And her sister might not have had that or have had the opportunity to do that because she had other support systems, other moral compasses pulling her back to center to follow their Polaris or their true north. So that would be my take on it. But I'm interested to see what Dr. Raj has to say.
You know what this makes me think of is my siblings. I got a brother and a sister, and it's funny when we talk about the same event and 3 stories. That's life. I mean, we kind of act like we're all sitting in the same place and we have the same awareness of it. Normal people have different versions. And so the fact that Lori is different than her sister, on one level, that's just normal. That's just what normal people do. The fact that she went so far off says more about her mental status than her sister. And again, it's hard. And I see this when I talk to my siblings. We can sit and argue an hour over the same event we all 3 were at. But we can't get an agreement on this story. And so what we have to go is, well, I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree. Because I am just telling my story, my truth through my eyes. And there's the same thing with Lori. You're seeing one set of eyes and the sister has a different set of eyes. And wow. And their perception of parenting can be at a 180 difference. Mother could have said something in front of both of them and one say, oh, she's terrible. The other say, she's so loving. It's a weird deal. It's humanity.
It's interesting you bring that up, not to mention it again, because I mentioned on the show last night, but I got my first official book deal and I'm working on a book right now and it will have the same title as the podcast. And it is Life Advice from my Holocaust survivor mom, who's also a therapist, who also lost a child. So she's been around the block at 83 and she's offering up her life advice. And the chapter I'm working on now is about children. And my sister and I, who I love to death, could not be more different.
Amen. There you go. Hey, that proves she is your sister, is what I'd say.
She became a doctor when she was 21. It was valedictorian. I am the black sheep of the family. It is a chip I've carried on my shoulder, Raj, that I won't get into my whole
buddy.
life.
Hey, that's why we're brothers.
I finally bought a shirt that says, I'll wear it.
Me.
I have a black sheep shirt. But anyway, we talked about that. And Carm had an interesting perspective. And if I can write this book, which I'm trying to do and is taking years off my life, everyone can read it at some point. But back to this. So to you, Dr. Appleton, Connie writes, Lori is a manipulator. She did whatever she wanted to get her way. Everything was and is about her. These are the comments that we get, which is interesting. From Ketchup, friend of the show, I still refuse to think that Lori and Chad were smart or are smart. Would you like to retort?
Yes. We are associating smart with a positive trait. Smart is smart. It's not positive or negative. What you do with your smarts matters. It takes a high level of intelligence to evade police for months, to evade your family, to make up stories, to keep them all straight. What Lee Walker's saying, just to have all these cell phones, that to me is intelligence. But do not mistake intelligence or smart for somebody that is using it for good. It all depends that, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that that's the thing that I equate when I say smart. It's not necessarily only used for positive things.
And Maggie Seymour, this is a great question. STS, that's me. Please ask the best guest if they believe Lori would have done this without having met Chad. What do you think, Dr. Raj?
Already did it before she met that idiot. Just no. I mean, wait a minute. Let's go back. This girl was in a bad land long before this other guy showed up. I mean, he just caught a train going down the track. It was a train of badness. Lori was running the train, and he just was a passenger, you know. And why'd she pick him up? Because it suited her, you know. That just like her quote unquote followers, you know. Why'd she pick them up? It suited her. And the smart idea is, you're right, the telephones. It was not that she had a lot of telephones. I mean, drug dealers have a lot of telephones, but it's how she chose to use those is where you really get the idea of smart. Smart comes from being able to take a bland moment and turn it to your advantage.
Right.
That is a trait of smartness, you know.
And Bozia Hellwitch, back to Dr. Appleton here. Some great questions coming in. Hi, everyone. Bozia from South Australia. I think Lori has some schizophrenia or manic depression, bipolar maybe. Her lack of emotions may be due to the medications she's taking her to manage moods. I know it's hard to diagnose someone, Dr. Appleton, when you haven't really ever met them and you're just hearing stories. But what's your initial take on this comment?
I'm not allowed to diagnose anybody without meeting them. So I think, there are plenty of people who have schizophrenia and, MDD or bipolar who are on these medications who have a full range of emotions. So I can't say without knowing her or knowing what she's taking, if these are suppressing her emotions or her empathy. I think that at the end of the day, there is a way to connect and to respond to somebody. Even she had no reaction, the human reaction that we have. So I have to say, I don't think that it's because of the medications or whatever diagnosis this was. I think it went into what Dr. Raj was saying about narrative and about this needed to fit the story. And if she was very hell-bent on being the savior of her children, to deviate from that would not serve her behind closed doors or bars or in the public eye.
And we'll wrap this up in just a few minutes. But Harvard lawyer Lee says she's going to be discussing this call between Summer Shiflett on her live right after this at the Harvard lawyer Lee YouTube channel at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So check that out. But Harvard lawyer Lee, the phone call continues yesterday, saying from Summer, Lori, if you let this happen to them and put them in the ground like a piece of trash, I don't know you. We would have taken them. Summer is now screaming at Lori. You cut me and mom off for 4 months. Now we find this out, and you expect me to just keep going with zero explanation, and you expect me to just keep believing without ever having a question. Lori says, everyone sees what's on TV. Summer responds, this has nothing to do with what's on TV. She screams at Lori about how she defended her on TV and asked for Lori to tell her the truth. Lori says, I would love to, and obviously didn't.
She never has. Wait a minute. She's never not told the truth. That's what that viewer doesn't get. You're hearing Lori's truth. Okay, she's not lying. I guarantee you could hook that woman up to a lie detector and she could pass it with colors. As long as she's stuck to her facts and her story, there it is. And I love many of your viewers are indirectly asking why. Well, goodness gracious, unless somebody here has magical qualities where they can read people's minds, nobody's going to know why, because the person who actually did it, I doubt, knows why. Well, she knows why. She was following her narrative. That's what that was all about, and that's the why. She was fitting the narrative, and when people fit the narrative, yahoo, and when they didn't, get rid of them.
Yeah. But Harvard lawyer Lee, from a legal standpoint, I guess, what do you find interesting about these calls? I mean, and is this the the nail the proverbial nail in the coffin for Lori here, this testimony that's being offered up?
Well, I called the video I'm going to do at 1:30 bombshell admission, because I do think it's extremely important and has a lot of information that Lori is giving up that she may not even realize she's giving up, but important facts. But as I said, I don't think there's any one piece when you have a circumstantial evidence case normally that carries the day, but I think some of the things she said are extremely important. And I think her demeanor mattered a great deal. Just even if you took aside some of the things she said, the way she says them so coolly, so calmly, without emotion, in stark contrast to Summer, is really important, because I think that is something that talks about who she is as a person. And the jury is going to resonate with that or not resonate with it, as the case may be. So I think it is hugely important. Yes.
David writes, this is a great question. And Dr. Appleton, I'm going to toss this one to you. What do the guests think of Lori's incest-like childhood, strange family dynamic? She was beyond close with her brother Alex, and some people do think there was not necessarily a sexual relationship, but something that, crossed the line of incestuous in some way. Any take on this from your perspective?
We know that trauma rewires the brain, especially childhood trauma of any kind, especially sexual or inappropriate even, because we get our wires crossed. We don't know who to trust. We don't know how to react. We don't know who to react to, especially if there was any grooming involved or anything like that. So I know from a brain and behavior standpoint that it can absolutely lead up to disaster of a lot of different kinds. And we've seen that. So I think that, no one survives their family, so to speak. Like, we all have our things, but when we're talking about things that really hit on a deep and an emotional level, things like, any type of abuse or potential abuse, a child is very much ripe for the picking in a lot of ways, to have to relearn social cues and a lot of things of that nature.
And Dr. Raj, just to put a bow on this phone call, in court
this
at
has
11.
Been fun, hadn't it? I tell you, you ladies are awesome. That's from Dr. Rogers' view.
I love it. I love it.
My IQ has gone up greatly listening to you two. Wow.
Dr. Raj,
Yes.
Lori says this to her sister Summer, and she says the following: "Nobody in the world knows what I've been through. You've only seen what's on TV. Nobody knows what I've been through." Does that surprise you at all? That's coming out of her mouth.
Probably nobody that's alive. But if we could pull back Manson and some of that crowd, they might have a clue on this plan. But go back to Lori's running her own movie. And so she certainly understands the movie. And there it is. And could anybody understand unless they were mind readers? No, they couldn't understand Lori's motive or anything else. She's not well, and she's off the reservation. Boy, that pretty much, I think, says it all. You can see how she is not well and off the reservation legally here. And you can see test-wise why she's not well and off the reservation. And we can all ask why. Let's just hope it works and they get her off, or this is another ball she's dodged, and she'll be back on it again somewhere, somehow.
Freshly baked dread. I love that name. For Dr. Appleton, will Lori talk to a journalist if she's convicted? Will she ever give her side of the story? What's your gut tell you? She's the type of person that wants to reveal all once if she's convicted and has to sit behind bars the rest of her life?
I think so, because with the narcissistic tendencies, why wouldn't I want to talk about myself and what I went through? This statement of, you have no idea what I've been through, you only see what's on TV. I think it's almost a precursor. It's a foreshadowing of.
It screams book deal to me.
It
Come
does.
on. Why talk to a journalist for free?
I mean,
I can reel them in. I'm looking if she's convicted for a sales pitch.
Not dumb. Not dumb.
No, oh Lord, no. There's a bottom line to her thinking.
Majip writes, hi from Holland. She is the mastermind. Harvard lawyer Lee, to you. Another interesting part of the trial is it was supposed to last 8 weeks. Lori Hellis went on the record saying she thinks closing arguments could be as soon as early next week. What do you make of the fact that the trial seems to be moving at a super fast clip?
There are, I think, a couple of reasons for that. They pulled out the death penalty. So that would have added a substantial amount to the trial. And when in the initial estimations, they were assuming there would be a death penalty component to it. So that gets pulled out. And then you've also got the fact that the defense has done really short or no cross-examination of a whole bunch of witnesses, which significantly cut the trial. I mean, the prosecution has said, well, things are going faster than we expected. So I think that they were expecting more cross-examination than they got. It just hasn't really been joined. The issues haven't, for the most part. There's been just pretty much a prosecution presenting its case and just very little cross-examination or delving into the facts by the defense. So I think that accounts for why it's so much shorter. Lori would have a good grasp of it being there. I can't say for sure when the closing arguments will be, but they're going to be a lot sooner than the 10 weeks initially projected.
And the man Dr. Phil wishes he could be is Dr. Roger Rhodes. He is a senior therapist at the Pace Center in Greenville, South Carolina, specializing in all things dysfunctional relationships. He also has worked with inmates, so he knows the type well, the Lori Vallow type well. Sadie, Raj, for your final thoughts here. Does the panel, you, Raj, have any ideas as to why the children were disposed of in such different ways? It looks like we're finding out right now that JJ was asphyxiated, Tylee was burned. It is hard to even process that or imagine that, but any thoughts and your final thoughts as to why they may have been killed in two very different ways?
Tough to be single with children. There's the bottom line. Her narrative was I'm youngs and singles and loves to mingles, and I'm gonna go to Hawaii and Yahoo it up. That was her, and they stood in the way. And I'm thinking they were killed in a different way because that was what was available. People get knifed when there's a knife close. People get shot when there's a gun close. That's why there was no rhyme or reason. It was more about disposal, not part of her film, not useful in the movement. May have been useful at other times, and so Yahoo got them. But they can't. It's hard when you want to be single to sell that when you're carrying a couple of kids. But get rid of kids, get to be single. There it goes.
I love it. Dr. Daryl Appleton, we threw her into the fire. I hope she comes back. She is described as the innovative and modern day doyen. You have to Google that. Buddy. I did. Of wellness, who is reshaping corporate and individual visions of wellness. Since opening a consulting firm that bears her name, she holds an exclusive clientele of global Fortune 500 executives who might want to advertise on my podcast, thought leaders and specialists, and professional athletes from across the globe looking to elevate their plans for success and to fight burnout and mental fatigue. We all need to do that, fight burnout and mental fatigue. But as you can tell, she is truly a best guest when it comes to understanding the human mind. Any final thoughts today in regards to Lori Vallow, Daybell, and your future show with Dr. Roger Rhodes?
You all heard it here first. The show will go on. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I think, we're going to see a lot more, and I think people are very much interested in the outcome of this, as am I. I think we won't have all of our questions answered, and that's just part of cases like this. We're usually left a little bit hanging until her book deal comes out, and then we're left with even more questions. I guess my final thoughts for wellness are try not to get too attached, because vicarious trauma through being so entwined in something as graphic and as moving as something like this, take a break when you can, because there are studies, I have to end with a study because I'm a nerd, that do show that if we get too ingrained into stuff that can impact us on this level, it's not great for our mental health or our well-being.
And we love nerds here. Elf with I guess this is a super sticker, whatever it is. Thank you. And back to you, Dr. Appleton. It has been brought up she was causing Tylee's illnesses pre-Chad. There is this Munchausen syndrome that apparently there was pancreatitis. I don't know if that was JJ or Tylee, but what about the fact that she was claiming these illnesses or possibly creating illnesses in the children? Would that surprise you in any way?
No, Munchausen's by proxy has an incredible tie to narcissism. Again, it gets to be about me and how terrible for me. I have a sick child. Look, I took in this kid with autism. Like, how great am I? How great is this? So I think, again, to Dr. Raj's point, it feeds the narrative.
Yeah. I saw a sticker I have to mention. Somebody put a Boomer Sooner sticker for the University of Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner, dude. That's what I got to say about that. And good. I love this because I've always wondered what the smart kids were thinking when I was in school. I was in the back of the area. So again, what a wonderful moment. Smart people,
speaking of smart students, Lee Wallace graduated first in her class at Vanderbilt, cum laude from Harvard Law School. She was named a top 100 lawyer in Georgia and a Georgia SuperLawyer. Make sure in 5 minutes that you check her out at her YouTube channel, Harvard Lawyer Lee. She's going to discuss that phone call between Summer Shiflett and Lori Vallow Daybell on her channel momentarily. Last question, Kay Simontel. If Lori wins appeal, Harvard Lawyer Lee, can prosecution seek death penalty next time?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I would think yes, but I don't know for sure.
And any final thoughts on your end?
Oh, on my end. Sorry.
She's prepping for her show.
It's
I
your
really
turn.
appreciate getting to come on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoy getting to talk to other people and learn about people's thoughts from other disciplines. So thank y'all for sharing.
And thank you. A quick programming note: tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time, another unusual time. Follow me at Podcast STS on Twitter for showtimes. We have the Florida State Attorney on, who's going to weigh in on this, Dave Arenberg, out of Palm Beach County. He's a Democrat, and he has a guy named Donald Trump in his county, so he's in the news a lot. And his name is Dave Arenberg. He'll be here to weigh in on Lori Vallow Daybell. No politics on this show, but he will discuss Lori Vallow Daybell. And then Friday, 12:30 Eastern time, Great Scott. It's time for your True Crime Phil with Scott Duffy and the great Phil Waters. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Georgia. Love you, South Carolina. Love you, Rhode Island.